Perfect. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for letting us know where you are, your fun vacation spots, lots of ideas on where we can hop on a plane and go to next. So, thank you all for participating and starting to throw things in the chat. So, we'll go ahead and dive in. First off, thank you so much for joining today. I'm Danielle Stewart. I actually lead up our brand and advocacy function at Go1. So, I work very closely with our customers and partners day in and day out to tell all of their wonderful stories and get the word out around the impact that it has to our customers and partners. But today isn't about me. We have three amazing learning and development leaders here with me today to talk about helping managers grow into their roles and improve. So while our challenges and opportunities are unique, depending on the organization, there are many commonalities as well. So according to our research, as a part of our recent Engage report, there are three common ambitions of L&D teams globally that all come into play when it comes to guiding outcomes for people managers. The first is that 60% of teams are focused on improving engagement within the workforce through L&D tools, communications, and learning culture. Next, 57% have goals to attract and retain top talent through professional development. And lastly, but certainly not least, 56% are all about creating customized training programs and career paths for specific job roles. So all of these goals require people managers to embrace their teams, push them to be their best, and stay motivated and present in their roles. So before I go any further, I do have a poll question to keep you on your toes. I'll go ahead and prompt that now. There we go. The first one. So are you leveraging your people managers as your L&D advocates and lifeline? So I would love to have people interact and share within the poll. Give everyone just a couple minutes to throw that in, and then I will end voting and share results. I'm going to say we're pretty even so far. Still got some answers rolling in, so I'll give everyone just a couple more seconds to get their answer in. Perfect. So I'll go ahead and share results of that. So it looks like we were about even. So 35 and 33%. So very, very close. Perfect. At Go1, we really do understand that the vital role that people managers play for driving change, which is why we created the Leadership Playbook, which inspired today's webinar. You'll have the option to get a copy of the playbook as a takeaway to the webinar. So you'll have support in building your own leadership program. Also, carving intentional time to learn during the workday can be hard, which, spoiler alert, will be a topic of conversation today. But I want to say I'm so incredibly thankful that you all prioritize learning from our panelists today. Lynn, Shen, and Deanna are here today to speak about how they engage their people managers in development and impact reaching this group can have on your overall L&D strategy for all employees. Because at the end of the day, we often view our experience at an organization through our relationship with our manager. So before I pass the mic and introduce themselves, we do have one more quick poll for you. And the question will be, do you currently have Leadership Pathways program? So I'll go ahead and get that ready. And it's live. Give everyone just a couple more seconds to get answers in. We still have some rolling through. I'll say this one's pretty even across the board as well. Perfect. I'll go ahead and share those results. So it looks like we're pretty even across the board with being in the research phase, being the last place winner, but across the other three, we were really close with being head on. Perfect. So I will stop there and let the panelists introduce themselves. Shen, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Shen Walker. I'm the Director of Learning and Development for Hayes Recruitment. I specifically look after our North America business, which includes Canada, the US, as well as Mexico. And I'm also meant to talk around one of my best managers. So the best manager I actually ever had was actually my first manager in learning and development. And the reason they were my best manager was they really encouraged me to always, challenge myself, but also really create a safe space to challenge others and take them to the next level. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Lynn, would you go next, please?
Hi, I'm Lynn McNamee. I'm president of Lone Armadillo Learning, and I am based in Central Florida. And the best manager I ever had, I was recently out of college and I was in a long-term temp position at Fannie Mae and really loved the working environment, loved the people, wanted the permanent position, and the manager said no. She saw more potential in me and insisted that I really develop the different abilities and keep going. So I actually have to thank her for saying no.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. Deanna, would you like to go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna Foster. I live in the New York metro area, and I lead a team of learning solution consultants at Harvard Business Publishing who design leadership development experiences for our clients around the world. And the best leader I ever had was also my first L&D leader, who was a visionary. She created an engaging, collaborative environment, set very high standards for excellence for all of us. But then she gave us many opportunities to think and act expansively in pursuit of that excellence. So it was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for the quick introduction, and I'm very excited to get started on the questions. So our first question that is going to pop through is, how do you define leadership? Lynn, would you like to kick us off?
Great. Yeah. And I appreciate the question because when we use the term leadership, it can mean so much to different people. At least for me, I usually try to distinguish between leadership, management, and supervision because they are different dimensions. And so for me, I experience leadership as really having that vision, articulating the purpose, and being attentive to kind of opening the floor, those opportunities for others to contribute their vision, their expertise, their experiences in expanding that and maybe shifting it, but kind of being that facilitator, organizer, creating that opportunity to bring intentionally the multiple voices in. So it's not necessarily a title or a seniority, but it's an attentiveness to all the different voices, all the different people on the receiving end as well as within the organization.
Love that.
I'm going to piggyback on that because I agree. It's so much more than a title. I think everybody has the capacity to be a leader. We're all leaders of our own lives, but when we choose to lead others, then it becomes a responsibility and a privilege, because in that role, you are a catalyst for other people's growth and development, and your actions have such a big impact on the quality of others' work experience. So I define leadership as having that ability to lead yourself so that you enable others to do their best work in service to meeting the needs of the business. So for me, it's about setting the stage, as you mentioned, so that others can reach their full potential, and balancing that in relation to achieving organizational goals.
Yeah, I love what you guys have both said, and I would completely mirror that. For me, something I've always operated under the umbrella of leadership is leading without a title. I don't think someone needs a title to demonstrate leadership. But something that I've really reflected on the last couple of years is that, to me, a leader truly has that potential to lead someone to achieve their goals, both personally and professionally. I think, like you said, Deanna, we're leaders of our own lives, right? And as a leader, we spend a lot of our time at work with our people. So we set the tone for engagement, we set the tone for culture, we set the tone for how people achieve results through psychological safety. empathy, and leading from the front. So those are a lot of the things that sort of define leadership for myself.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your insightful answers. So the next question, knowing skills should link back to business priorities. How would you recommend L&D teams prioritize and choose the skills to include in leadership programs?
Yeah. I'll take this one first. For us at Hays, I mean, we felt that having that really defined and clear understanding of what the business like truly needs to drive results at every level of leader. For us, we're like a multi-country, multi-specialism organization. We've got salespeople. We've also got really diverse corporate roles. And we really needed to like define that foundation of core leadership skills that were really universal. That it was ultimately underpinned by our leadership and management DNA. So our leadership and management DNA is sort of defined by 4 major pillars. One, how does a leader lead themselves? How does a leader lead others? And what are the core things that sit under that umbrella? Also, like, how does someone achieve results effectively and efficiently? Because like I said, that diversity in our organization and diversity in leaders, that's going to mean a different thing for someone who leads our legal function compared to our front office sales teams. And then finally, one of our other pillars was really about looking outwards into the future. And to me, that's so fundamental. How do we develop in our leaders to be looking forward? Because ultimately, our leaders are the people that are going to be leading the organization in the future. So what we did in terms of like knowing what those skills are, we basically built some programs for emerging leaders and realized we needed to develop some foundational things to help them move into leadership. And then we had to develop a senior program. So a lot of where our skills were being defined is we had to look at where and meet people where they're at in their actual career journey, and then develop like feedback cycles, engagement with board, and make sure that all of the things that we were aligning in our leadership pathways had a direct correlation to business objectives. Lynn,
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mainly work with small, medium businesses. And one of the things that for the leadership training, management training, a lot of times information's been assumed that people know. So one of the things that we're doing is making sure a lot of those fundamentals of like HR laws and some basic financial literacy that a lot of times in small, medium businesses, like it's just either assumed or passed over, but everyone's operates assuming that people do know these standard fundamentals. So it's just making sure those elements are being addressed because they really are those building blocks for the future. And then we're able to much more take to what being just really razor focused on what are those KPIs in each of the different business units and drawing a real straight line, very clear connection. What are we going to measure? How are we going to measure it? What defines success? And how are those other individuals being evaluated to make sure we're really supporting those? So, Deanna?
Yeah, as you've both pointed out, there's never a shortage of skills to be developed, but prioritizing them is such a key. I mean, we just can't afford to put more demands on people's time unless there's a direct benefit to the business priorities. When we work with our clients, we recommend that they start with the strategic pillars of their organization, right? How is the business differentiating itself in the market today? And then what are the capabilities people need to achieve those strategic goals? Then Shen, as you said, once you've defined those capabilities in a broad sense, then you can define skills more specifically by leadership level, right? What skills do senior level leaders need, mid-level, frontline leaders to execute on the strategy? And then differentiating your skill level by development. So you're giving each level of leader only what they need to achieve those goals. And Shen, I also love that you talked about the future, because I think it's important that you look to future and identify the capabilities the business will need given trends in the industry, your customer preferences, potential impacts of technology advances. And then again, identifying the skills, there'll be too many. So prioritize those by mapping to the business goals and then focusing first on one of 2 areas, right? What are the skills that are the weakest in the organization, or which skills will have the greatest impact on achieving those goals?
Love that, and love the alignment across all three. So the third question that we have is, when learners share objections to training, what advice or strategies have you used to influence leaders as L&D leaders to gain buy-in? And how can we get buy-in from our executive level?
I can jump in here to start us off. Gosh, we've been for all of us who've been in L&D for a long time, right? Buy-in. We're always trying to get buy-in. I found that the best defense to objections is a good offense, right? And that's achieved by designing at the outset for relevance. So the best way to influence people to spend time learning is to connect that learning directly to helping them learn to do their jobs or be able to do their jobs more effectively, more efficiently, ideally with more joy as well, right? The truth is, people don't go to work to learn; they go to work to work. So it's a perennial dilemma for L&D leaders. How do you compete with the demands of people's jobs? One thing that I thought was interesting that I'd like to share is, over the past few years, we've surveyed thousands of learners and asked them, how many hours per week would you ideally dedicate to learning? And the most frequent response we get, we give them some options, is 1 to 2 hours. But what I find is most interesting is that people also consistently say that they'd be willing to spend more time if the learning was relevant to their job performance or their career goals. So I think designing for relevance for individual learners is really key. And then executive buy-in is going to come from showing how learning is going to impact the business. So what are the executives' performance concerns, right? Are they concerned that the organization isn't innovative enough, that the decision making is too slow, or execution isn't agile enough? And then designing learning to achieve behavior change related to those concerns. And so that you can say to your executives, well, if people invest in this learning, there will be greater innovation, faster decision making. I think that helps get their advocacy, which is ideally what you want. You want them to be advocates for the learning you're developing.
Yeah. I actually love the word that you said there. It was joy, Deanna. I think that's something that I actually lead in everything that I do. I don't want to be Marie Kondo about everything, but I do look at everything like, how do you bring joy to it? Because when people are engaged and they're happy, they're going to lean into it. But I think when we talk around how do you we just have to accept we're going to get objections. Like, that's just the reality of L&D. You are going to get objections day in, day out, because different competing priorities in today's world is just, it's a lot, right? So what we'd recommend, or what I'd say is that, like, focus on building that learning culture at every level of the organization, not just pockets of it. It has to go from top down, but bottom up as well. And that's where, like, aligning learning with someone's career journey, making sure that communications from day one, that it's championing a message that this is how we operate as an organization. It's important to celebrate learning results and really like that peer-based success, where you get internal communications across your organization, where it's not just L&D telling you to learn or your leader telling you to learn. It's peers who've had success with it, really bringing that to life. And then getting your senior stakeholders to really reinforce those messages. They've got to be the key champions of learning in the organization. Because at the end of the day, they do listen to their peers or the principals. So the principals are like the senior people in their worlds. So that buy-in and linking to success is just so fundamental.
Definitely agree. So I come from a marketing background, and we're obsessed with personas. And the idea of personas is, how is somebody already walking through the world? What already matters to them? And making that connection of what they're already thinking about, what they're already struggling with, what they already want, where they go for resources, so that communication and tailoring the communication to what is already driving them. So whether that's the learners in our different programs and our different courses, or with trying to get that buy-in from senior management, is really tailoring that communication to what they're already thinking about. So it's never a one size fits all. And to also always keep in mind that money goes to solve a problem, and time is dedicated towards what someone wants, and trying to keep that in mind when making the pitch.
Love that. Perfect. Next question. How have you taken a program from ideation to creation, successfully marketing a program to people managers?
I'll take this one first. I mean, at Hayes, we really realized that leadership training, I think we sort of touched on this earlier in the webinar, that it's got to meet the business where they're actually at. And new leaders truly need certain development and that confidence to actually be instilled. They've also got to learn resilience. If I go back to the beginning part of my career when I first leaned into becoming a manager or a leader, I basically just told people what to do, right? And I didn't know that you had to take people on a journey and really bring that to life. So instilling that resilience and giving a leader, and especially a new leader or a new manager, those practical strategies to really develop themselves and their people, that's so fundamental. So what we did is we actually built a emerging leader program, which has 12 sessions. It's basically one per month. And that sets the foundation to set them up for success and actually build that learning community as well. We then built a next level leadership program, which was really about management development. So how do we take our leaders with that foundational sort of experience and really advance that? And like I sort of touched on, that avenue for peer-based learning, we then link that with co-delivery with senior leaders. So not only does an attendee really get that learning theory bit in application, they get that real life input. And having that senior leader really co-deliver programs, they naturally are then going to actually embed that leadership program, that leadership concept into the organization. And that's really helped us establish that culture. And I think I touched on it before, but people really talk. So coupled with celebrating those wins and aligning learning with career journey, we actually made it that our learning programs, you don't get promoted until you've actually successfully completed these programs. That allowed us to really embed that even though someone's promoted, that they might not have the skills, now they're getting promoted, but they also have the skills and they've been accredited. So that's where we've really had success from that creation piece and really bring it to life. And now people are asking to be part of the program. We've got a natural sort of engagement. And I think Lynn touched on, and I'll pass it to her in a moment, that marketing piece, people self-market basically. So Lynn, what was your approach to it?
Yeah, it's really hard to follow you because I just think that's an ideal scenario. You've achieved what we're all trying to get toward. And that whole personas thing is just, I think, so foundational and is how we really structure everything. So I generally talk about it so that people can quickly get it, as any Harry Potter fans in the group. So Hogwarts has 4 houses, and they sort of really capture 4 different types of personalities of what is driving someone. And so the word choices, the images we use, the rewards that we offer, because we need to make sure we're not just doing the pre and the during. Are we doing the payoff at the end of what we promised? Here's what you're going to get for going through all this and doing this. Is it your own advancement? Is it fame and glory? And so really just trying to make sure that we're capturing. So the Slytherins are going to want the fame and the glory. Is it that lunch in the middle of the cafeteria with the senior leader? The Gryffindor is fine meeting with the senior leader up in the office. Your Ravenclaw just wants to know everything, but at some point, do they get a chance to be acknowledged for having all this additional depth of knowledge? And then your Hufflepuff just wants to be part of the team and save the world and do all that. So really looking at the full process from start to beyond, where I think we frequently finish, to push it a little bit farther. So Deanna?
Lynn, thank you. That was excellent storytelling and using a story to engage our emotions as we need to with learners, right? And to emphasize that payoff at the end, the what's in it for me. When we work with our clients, we rely on them to tell us where the learners are. We generally do an extensive needs analysis. And that helps us kind of understand the persona of the learners and what their current challenges are. And it's one example that I have of having some success with that is at a large financial institution. the value prop that we were going after with our learning was personalization at scale. And we did an extensive needs analysis so that we could meet people where they were. We knew the skills they wanted to develop. We knew what kind of learning they would find most engaging. We also introduced choice. So we gave them, we allowed them choice in what they were going to learn. And then we made sure the learning was directly applicable to a current job challenge that they were having. And this example I chose, it's going to speak to this idea of peers encouraging peers and word of mouth, because people do talk. We ran that, our client ran that session with cohorts of 1,500 people at a time for over 2.5 years, or about 2.5 years. And it was an open enrollment process. And when they opened the enrollment and made it available, slots filled within 24 hours every time it ran. And so the credit there goes initially to the marketing that our clients did in the organization, but eventually it was that word of mouth that kept that interest and enrollment going.
Yeah, I love all those interests, and the personalization behind it, and really getting at what drives individual people and making it feel like you care about the individual and not just the overarching program, because the individual's contributions are truly what matter there. So love that. The next question, how did you go about measuring the success of these programs? And is there any outcome you've seen that you're particularly proud of?
I can kick us off on that one. Yes, measuring success, how critical, right? To get the dollars, to get the funding, to get the advocacy, the buy-in, all those things that we want. We have a measurement process that helps our clients define the success measures that are most important to their organizations. And we begin by creating a measurement plan at the very beginning of the design process. We generally ask our clients, what data are your stakeholders currently using that tells them that you even need a leadership development intervention? Because that's usually going to be the best metric to gauge success of learning on the business. Then we have a measurement plan that focuses on 3 areas of impact. The first is impact on the learners. We measure engagement, the extent to which people participated in the learning. The second impact measure is on behavior, and we collect evidence that learners applied new skills on the job. And then finally, that impact on the business is measured by our clients using those measures that they identified in the design phase to determine just how far learning moved the needle on the presenting concern. And you asked about a success and measuring success. It's not one specific, but one of the concerns that we've heard frequently is that there aren't enough ready now leaders in the pipeline to fill more senior roles, and that organizations are doing too much external hiring at senior levels. So 2 measures that we've used to measure the success of learning and that we've seen a positive improvement on are the number of people who participated in a learning experience who were then promoted. And the second is the percentage of positions that were filled by internal candidates versus external candidates in the months that followed the learning experience. So that's 2 things that we've done that we've seen success with in measurement.
Yeah. I'll jump in. I mean, there's 2 bits that I think anyone who's just listening today could take a huge amount away from what you've just said, and just to have that framework. And I agree with you, like measuring success is multifaceted, right? And it's the piece that I really love that you said is like shaping that and asking the questions up front really can then help you measure the success, because sometimes board members might say to you, we need to get a leadership program, we need to do these type of things, but without defining it and without starting at a bookend of like, really, what does success look like? What would great look like? And determining data points, that's going to be hard. So for us, we really need to see, results in productivity, where we can actually link them back to learning and training. Like, how long does it take for someone to get to production? Is there an improved retention rate with leaders, with their people in their team? Because a lot of the time you hear the old sort of analogy, people don't leave an organization, they leave a manager, right? So it's really about how do you improve those sort of retention rates. We also look at HR data, and we do a lot of organizational type surveys to get that information to tell us the programs that we're doing are working. And one of the things that we've looked at when we're most proud of as an organization is that we've really developed a pre-coaching program. We've done a lot of work about being virtual and in person, and making sure that the learning that they have, where they take the 2 hours out, the 3 hours out of their days, that it actually sticks. It didn't just be, some time that they took out of their business, that they actually really made sure that the stuff they need to learn, they're able to go and apply that at every level of the organization. So one of the things that we built, and we use Go1 as a platform as our learning management system, and Hays ourselves, we've designed and developed over 1,000 learning items in conjunction with all of like the stuff that's on Go1, where we can really report on that utilization piece. And what we're really proud of is we've seen over 80% of utilization in Go1 pretty much each month across the organization, meaning that people are really accessing learning, and that leaders, we can see it by, we can basically report by leader, leaders are championing that learning. So when we look at it, having that measurement, being clear on it, and then talking about what great looks like has really helped us as an organization.
Yeah, I agree and totally agree. And I'm all about the data. And one of the practical details that I would just to add on is that being almost neurotic about specificity. Who is measuring what? Who is recording it? Where is it being recorded? How is it being recorded? Had a team sales, they're thinking numbers are all off. Well, we drilled down to realize that in one of the fields in Salesforce, one person was recording contracts per year. The other was recording it for the whole length of the contract. And so it can be even like, that's not a huge learning program. That's just like, oh, Houston, we have a problem, and zeroing in on something like that. So really just drilling down on the technicalities of it to make sure we're really clear. And then it's not the finger pointing game at the end, or this conclusion that, oh, well, it didn't work. Well, maybe it did, but we did all the right stuff, but we just maybe needed to push a little bit further on those details. And one of the things that for the success that I really like to leverage is behavioral economics and that whole kind of peer pressure. For example, I loved the study about getting people to reuse towels in hotel rooms, and they tested of notices in the rooms of here's how many gallons of water you'll save and energy and all of this, and then versus 2/3 of the people on this floor are recycling their towels. And even though people in surveys had all said, yes, I care about the environment, all of this, it was that peer pressure, if you will, that worked. So there are ways that we can be leveraging that. And so just to kind of side example, but I used to do a lot of work with Rotary. And so just something as basic as getting them to update their logo. And it's a very personal, it's a very, everyone's really, as tied to it. But the organization for recruiting new members, breathing new life, moving into new markets had to change. So how do we do this? So literally developed a dance for the physical logistics of where to go to get the information and how to do it, so that it took the fear away, was memorable, and then we achieved, just through follow-up and celebrating the wins, had about a 36% increase in compliance. So just taking kind of a little different look, a little different approach with it.
Love that. And love the fun adding in. I think we all want to see the dance now.
I do.
We did have a question come through in the chat surrounding this, and it was, how often do the characteristics of personas and leader approaches need to be evaluated due to changing technology, culture, customer demand to keep internal learning programs relevant?
From a general personas perspective, if we're clear about personas being internal motivators, those actually don't tend to change a lot or very frequently. There may be, if someone becomes a new parent, yeah, a lot has just changed. And so some of those life changes might have an impact. Generally, with the way that we approach things is we're always providing options for testing and transitioning someone to a different persona. And so we'll write the communications and we'll create different paths, but knowing if someone chose the version with this title, like we might have the identical course, and we'll just change the title. And depending which one they choose, alerts us because we wrote it that way to which persona they're in. So now we know what further communications to do. But we do regularly provide opportunities to, because it could just be the day of the week, it could be just came out of a meeting that didn't go so well, influences. But for the most part, at least in our experience, your core persona doesn't change, because the persona is not your job role, your job title, what device you're on, are you frontline, it's how you walk through this world. That's at least our experience, Dan or Shen.
Yeah. For us, it's probably once a year that we're sort of reviewing that sort of information. We sort of do, and we do 2 leadership cohorts per year, one sort of in June, one sort of at the beginning of the year. And we take some time, a couple of months out from that, just to review touch point at multi levels of the organization, mostly from the attendees though. We need to see, like, is this still relevant for you? We want to hear from them. And then also, has what they've been learning been making an impact? So I'd agree with Lynn, like sometimes our programs haven't changed for 2 years because they are meeting the business exactly where they need to. And then something like AI comes into it, or something like there's a significant shift, and we then absolutely need to redefine bits and pieces of that persona, or bits and pieces of that program. Deanna, any thoughts? Or?
Yeah, just to emphasize the gap, right? The personas don't change. So if you are aware of the persona of a particular leadership level, for instance, in your organization, but the world outside has changed and something significant like AI is being introduced, then how different does it's the gap. And now you know the gap. So we know what our persona is, or are, what they are, and we know what they need to be. How are we going to close the gap? So I think that's where it's useful in closing the gap. And then you will, in fact, redefine your persona.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll just touch on that AI piece. For us, like if you look at the demographic of an organization, most of our demographic of our organization didn't need to, like, they were already hungry for AI, but it was our leadership level that really needed the adoption piece. They really needed to be pushed in there. So that's why it was so critical for us to put it in a program faster than we had. Like we basically added it as a lunch and learn on top of our normal program, because we realized we couldn't wait for another 6 months. So I just say, like Deanna said, you've got to meet them. And if the external market is saying you've got to move quickly.
Love that. Thank you all. Our final official question, as learning and development leaders look to the future, what critical questions should they be asking themselves to ensure their strategies remain relevant and impactful?
I can jump in here. What question? So the question I would ask is, what is my leadership development strategy, and does it support the strategic goals of my organization?
Yeah. I love that one. The question I'd recommend is, where do your leadership skills actually need to be in 2027 to 2030? That's really where you should be aligning your leadership programs and skills to be impactful. Lynn, what are your thoughts?
I'm really kind of concerned about how we're modifying how we do things that we're doing with how students are being taught and the messages being reinforced. I mean, if you're in K through 12, you're being told year after year, I'm a visual learner, I'm an auditory learner, all of that. And if you've believed that for 12 years, then that's an approach and an expectation are coming in. So how are we as L&D professionals being open to modifying how we do things, and what our expectations are in light of the people who are now joining our ranks?
Yeah, love that perspective. We do have a couple questions that popped through. So the first one is, do you have any tips for someone who needs to align with their C-suite and present the need for leadership development in a way that will resonate with them?
Yeah.
Which one of us? I would flip the script on that and say, what do they want? Where are they seeing a gap in the business, either in the metrics they're using to measure the business, or when they look across and they look at, leaders at various levels, and then build a response to that. But if you bring them in that way, you're always going to hit them where they're most interested.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a word that you said before, Lynn, is about that assumption. A lot of the time, it is about asking them where they see the business and needs to have learning to support that. But sometimes they're not close enough to the business. I'm not saying they don't know those type of things, but it is that assumption that that's what the organization needs. So it's truly about sort of getting it at both levels and providing them actual feedback as well. Because a lot of the time, L&D is on the front line. They're speaking to people day in, day out. They're seeing virtual training. They're having observations of what's actually going on and feeding that information back to the C-suite and seeing whether that actually aligns together and where do you want to go forward. That's where I'd say you have to be at like both ends of the spectrum to really influence it. And then a lot of the times they're like, oh, they may recalibrate, or it may reinforce exactly what they're seeing as well.
Yeah, I love both those responses, and it has me thinking of just this whole desire, if we could really, as L&D professionals, get in earlier in the development of basically everything, because then we can be more proactive and we can provide that frontline connected with what's actually going on in the business. And it's sort of like we're not part of that competitive universe that can sometimes exist in the rest of an organization. And we're seeing also where things connect across departments. And I think that can really, where we can become the biggest ally with the C-suite. Mm-hmm. We can bring, as you're saying, that perspective. So it might be, we've got this pain now. Here's how we can help you moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And leverage personas. To add to that a little bit, I think it's a push-pull strategy. Initially, you may have to push and say, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're seeing. And then, Shen, I love what you said, like, how does it align with what you're seeing, feeling, and that will drive the conversation. But as your L&D function matures with the C-suite, eventually it will be pull, and they'll be coming to you saying, we want these things. And that's really the ideal situation.
Yeah, 100%.
We had a related question, just asking, what would you recommend if employees are embracing L&D, but the employer is not on board?
Tricky.
Good question.
If you don't mind me just jumping in for a second, I'd say that it has to come down to like employee data. What is the impact, right? If we aren't, like, what is it around retention? What is the impact of losing employees? Because I think you sort of put the stat at the beginning, Danielle, I can't remember the exact number, but it is like people these days, like people come to organizations to learn, that is an attraction strategy these days. And if they're not meeting that, they're probably going to go elsewhere. And it might be around showing data around the impact of not just link it just like directly to L&D, but is retention important to them? What is the impact of losing that type of employee if they're saying that's what's important to them? And again, that's where personas come into it, not just leadership personas across the organization. If someone's saying, I want to learn, and the organization isn't providing that, they're going to say, peace out, Brussels sprout. Like, I'm not going to stay there and continue to do that. So that's where I'd say is you might need to influence them in a different way. Still link it back to learning, but you certainly need to go to the organization. What is the risk or the impact to them?
I love that. Because we know it can cost up to 4 times as much someone's salary to replace them.
Yeah.
And I would say that individual is a Ravenclaw, just if you were wondering. But so these are the people who really have all that institutional knowledge. They're the ones who are picking up on a lot of, there's just so much that you'll lose if you lose that individual. So yeah, absolutely. I like that angle that you took, Shen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the other cost I would add to that is opportunity costs. So what are you not doing by not upskilling people? So it's what are the real costs and what are the opportunity costs, which can also be real.
Retention can be the same as attraction, like you said. I mean, if you've got a good value proposition, a lot of people, why people come to join Hays. I mean, there's a lot of recruitment companies out there. They come because we have a brand of having a good learning and development. They'll then maybe go to other organizations, but they'll get the foundation. That's a good, powerful message when you want to be an employer of choice or you're trying to push that out there. It's not just about retention. It's also about attracting talent today. And talent today wants a place to be able to go and work and learn as well.
Yeah. And we're all brand ambassadors. So now this person leaves and they're commenting that it's not a place that I want to work or a place you want to work. Yeah, that's hard to come back from.
Yeah.
Yes, agree on all of those answers, because it is definitely something you're going to see more and more of. Employees expect you to invest in them in this day and age, and that's only going to increase. So 100% agree. Any tips for incorporating learning within the workday? I know we're all very busy, and so setting that time aside is something that a question has popped through on.
One thing that we've seen clients use fairly effectively is just the idea of nudges, because technology nowadays you can use those through many platforms. And there's always email if you want to kind of go old school with your nudges, but that's a way to just remind people that, the learning is available. And if you've got 5 minutes, here's something that you could be doing right now.
I'd agree. I mean, I think that communications, it has to be multifaceted. It has to come at multiple times, because you don't know when people are going to read things. Like we can't get a good measure on when someone's going to open an email or when they're going to do those type things. And probably the best thing for us is not just about go one, but there's equity in learning there 24/7. Like our people can go and access learning when they need to, basically. And that's what I'd say is it's so important that you're pushing that message that you should be taking time to learn, and that leaders need to embed that. Leadership messaging needs to do that. And just even if in one-on-ones with your people, your leaders are saying, what have you taken time out this week to learn? Those little nudges, whether it's verbal or written, is just so important.
Yeah. And I think fostering anchoring so that, there's that routine. Okay, when I go get the cup of coffee, here's some tip that is on the wall, maybe. So that there's also that social dimension. Everyone's experiencing a similar message so that you're fostering the communication around it. And is there some sort of, teach another dimension? Because we know if you then teach someone, it really helps solidify it. And now you're putting it a little more into practice and you're thinking about it a different way because you have to communicate it. And so trying to build some of that. So maybe it's, if we're thinking of those 5-minute type chunks, reinforcing the wins, yeah, I did know this, or so that it's not always the new. Are we also building in those oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm good, we're good, because then I'm more receptive to learning more.
We had a question come through about expanding on the concept of brand ambassador and how it makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is always selling, no matter your role. And the way that a company, there's this little thing called social media. Not sure if anyone's heard of it. So if someone has a good experience, a bad experience, then that really spreads. And recruitment is so much of it is what people are saying. This is a company I want to work for. They stand for these values. That's back to that whole leadership of what do you stand for and what will you not stand for? And I think Millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha are just really strong about that. So that having a brand ambassador approach and that learning is important and this company is investing in me is really critical. I don't know if that adds anything.
I relate to that. I would hone in for the group that we're talking to today, L&D leaders, that you can also have brand ambassadors for your learning programs. So if you pilot something, if you launch generally with a pilot approach, you could reach out if the pilot were successful, even if the pilot wasn't 100% successful, but you use those the people in the pilot to then make tweaks and improvements, you can actively ask those folks to be brand ambassadors for that particular program. And we've all mentioned throughout the course of this webinar the importance of peer-to-peer communication. So the internal social media network, so to speak.
Yeah. And I would agree, like that peer-to-peer piece is that they are your brand ambassadors, right? If they've had a good learning experience, they're going to go tell someone else they've had a good learning experience, or they'll quickly tell them they haven't had a good learning experience.
Yes.
For us, depending on the learning, when we have a systems experts program, so when new systems are being rolled out, our systems experts on all of they're the brand ambassadors. They're the ones who are meant to be the go-to people to help it, to celebrate it, to talk around when people are, afraid of change or they're afraid of a new product coming out. They're the ones who have to bring it to life on the ground, because we've only got 4 people in our L&D team for 2,000 employees, right? So we can't be the brand ambassadors for everything. So we need people on the ground to do that. So I'd say that's where it's so important, like Deanna said and what Lynn said, is that peer-to-peer, and your brand ambassadors can't just be L&D. It has to be the people in the organization bringing that and living and doing it.
Beautiful. Love that. And brand ambassadors are definitely very impactful. So can support all of that. So the last question, I think we have time for maybe one more. Which measures should L&D make so that enrolled programs flourish and don't flounder?
I think there's a lot of measures, but go ahead.
Yeah, there are. It's just impact measures. What are the impact measures in the organization that are going to speak to your organization? And they're going to be different in every organization. Frequently we work with clients and they talk about a return on investment. And we like to talk about impact because we think that's really what's going to drive funding for learning, and it's going to drive people to the learning. So I would say, where can you show that learning is having an impact on individuals, helping their professional development, their career development, and then on the business?
I would say just specifically, just to give you some practical things, I would say certainly things like consistency. Make sure that you are consistent when you are doing those sort of training type things, that it's at the same time or it's at the same thing, that it's the same level of quality, and you don't drop the ball on it. It's also about making sure it's being delivered at the right sort of time of day for that learner to be part of it, because you don't want to build this amazing program and then no one follows through with it. You've got to make sure that it's aligning up and that people understand also the expectations. When we roll out a new cohort, we set the expectation, and if they don't participate 2 times, they're out of the program, and that affects their career journey. So I just say things like that. There's little measures that you need to obviously work with HR, and it's bigger than just, putting a stick down, but like that's where you've got to sort of think about it much bigger picture to make sure that it is successful.
Yeah, love both of those responses. And I love when you're saying about expectations, because I'm really nudgy about it's more about managing expectations than learning objectives. Again, it's that communication. What can the C-suite, what can managers expect from what we're going to be delivering, and what can the learners expect with what they're going through? What is going to be that impact for them? What is that relevance? As Shen and Deanna were mentioning earlier. And I think one of the big things that would just say is we think big, but sometimes we need to scale back, and we're not going to solve everything. There's too much. A lot of times we put too much weight on one program and it can't bear it. It can't achieve everything. So being really specific about here's what we're going after. We think this is a foundational root cause, or here's the low-hanging fruit. Here's how we're measuring it. And this is the judge. There may be additional impacts, but to not expect everything's going to be fixed with the one, and just measuring very precisely that.
Love that. And thank you all so much. I think we've had quite a few questions roll through that have been really impactful, and we've loved all of the answers. Lynn, we definitely need to still see the dance so that we can remember that and use it within our own programs. I will go ahead and just throw that leadership playbook in the chat, and at the very top as well, you're able to download it clicking that button. Thank you all so much to our panelists, and thank you all so much to our participants for being so engaged and asking all these wonderful questions. There was a question in the chat just around whether this will be available as a recorded session. It will get emailed to you following this. I know that puts us at time. I will throw up just a couple more polls at the very end if you're able to stick around and answer those. But if not, have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure.
What's the first poll question, Jenia?
The first poll question is, I would like more information about the Go One platform.
Nice.
We've got some responses pulling through. And then the next question, just as a heads up, will be Go One is considering online, offline events. What are you most interested in? And then the third is, what topics are you most interested in coming to hear about in Go One webinars? So we'll give this first poll just a few more minutes, and then we'll switch to the second.
Danielle, you did a great job for jumping in at the very last.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Luckily, Jenna had it very well prepared, and so it made it much easier. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and click to our next one, which is now available. This one is us considering more events, so face-to-face versus online webinars, or a mixture of both. So just want to get a better idea of what would draw you in for events.
And you guys got a good turnout, almost 50% if you were over 200 enrolled.
Yes, it was. We had close to, I think it was right around 100. Just give it 30 more seconds and I'll switch to our last poll.
And I am going to have to hop. I've got a 1 o'clock.
No worries at all. Thank you so much, Dina. And of course, Lynn and Shen as well. I'm going to pull up the third poll, but we are good to go.
Ladies, it was lovely meeting you, working with you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, loved it. I would love to debrief with you guys. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Yes, that would be great. All the best, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you. Give everyone that's still on just a couple more seconds to answer the last poll, and then I will go ahead and log off and we'll wrap up the webinar. Just a friendly reminder, it will be shared via email as a recording, and please don't forget to download the leadership playbook at the top before you leave. Thank you for the comment, Brenda. Perfect. We'll end there, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. Have a wonderful day.